was you have the ability to not only be more empathetic, but also just that much more kind of well-versed in how you work with different partners if you can dabble a lot in different things. So when I was originally, actually, for any of you who are still looking back to the college days, I interned actually in a ton of different areas in the music industry. And that was some of the feedback that I had gotten from a mentor, which was, I was actually doing A&R, which is artist and repertoire. And they're the people who sign the bands to the labels. But one thing that my mentor had told me was, if you ultimately want to go into whatever department it is, A&R at the time, then being able to kind of test and learn almost across marketing and partnerships and A&R admin, music licensing, all those different things would just kind of continue to kind of give you a tool, like a toolkit, right, to better work with all of these partners. And even though I didn't go into A&R ultimately, I went into marketing. I think that still really resonated with me, because one of the biggest things that I work on and do now is actually integrated marketing, integrated planning. And that really calls me to work with all different kinds of partners and really understand their different motivations and their different kind of objectives and how we can best support and work together in those. And so a lot of kind of that hopping around that I did early on, and even within Disney, has really led me to be able to kind of best understand the nuances of each team and how to really kind of be empathetic to each of their goals and objectives so that we can create win-win situations. So when I did end up going to Disney, I actually started my career here at ABC Family, now Freeform. And so I was in the digital marketing department in the heyday of kind of social live tweeting and all of that good stuff. And then went on to the Disney Music Group, where I did digital marketing and partnership marketing. And I loved that, kind of brought me back into the music space. And then from there, I actually ended up joining and helping to co-create a function called digital engagement within our studio integrated planning team. And that was really about how we could make sure that all of our different digital leads across the company could really partner and maximize our efforts against some of our key franchises, which we all know and love: Frozen, Toy Story, etc. And then most recently, I had then transitioned into the studio's loyalty program, where I led integrated marketing for Disney Movie Insiders, back then Disney Movie Rewards, where the goal was to really come in and help to reimagine the loyalty program and really think about how we could think, I would say, rethink fan engagement at Disney, especially now as we're kind of more going towards D2C, really being kind of more forward thinking in terms of how we create relationships with our consumers at the studios. And I know, Laurie, you and I talked about this, but just recently, actually, as of like 2 weeks ago, had taken on a new role within the Disney Media and Entertainment Distribution team, leading integrated planning again for that division. So back to kind of all of the kind of different connective relationships and making sure that all of our teams are working well together.
Well, awesome. And congratulations on the new role. And we'll certainly talk a little bit about that more as we dig into the session. Just a quick bit about my background as a fellow marketer and someone with a little bit of a different spin and focus than other folks who have participated today. I actually came into marketing more from a technology background. I minored in computer science in college, mostly because my father was an IBMer and I had no idea what else to do. And these were certainly in the very early days. I hate to say it because I'm probably the oldest panelist today, but the very early days of computers and technology, and ended up working for Accenture for 4 years out of college. And you had talked about getting some advice from a mentor. And in my case, someone who ultimately ended up being a mentor and actually ultimately ended up introducing me to my husband and setting us up on a blind date was a boss of mine who was starting the technology practice at Accenture to sell some of their products as commercial software. And he needed someone to basically, I was kind of a jack of all trades, but I did some sales engineering and some product stuff and some marketing, and I moved into that. And that really set the stage for me to go into kind of technology marketing as a career, really coming from the tech side, working at a lot of Atlanta-based software companies, most of them small, some of them larger. I worked at a company that was acquired by IBM and worked there for a couple of years, which kind of brought it back full circle, as my dad was a career IBMer. So I think he finally thought I had a real job after working at all of these random no-name technology companies.
Okay.
But it gave me, you mentioned it, and a couple of the other speakers had talked about doing a lot of different things and seeing a lot of different things and being able to bring that perspective in. And I come from a technology background, which I think is incredibly helpful as we've spoken today about the different technologies we use in marketing, the prevalence of digital marketing, kind of the marketing evolution, and how what it really feels like as marketers is nothing is going away. We're just getting more and more things in our bag of tricks. And you always hear in person's dead, or print is dead, or advertising is dead. Nothing is dead, and we just keep getting more. It was social, it was mobile, now it's connected TV, and what's our play? So the cool thing about being in marketing is it's so dynamic. And even though I'm on the B2B side, there's still, I look at what y'all are doing in B2C, and I think when is that going to sort of shift a little bit and become relevant for me as a B2B marketer? And it's also fun to be a marketer and talk to other marketers and just, be part of such a just vibrant industry area where we really are such a huge influence with what's going on in the market and people's behaviors. And I think, even more so as we met and prepped for this, we thought we would take things maybe in a little bit of a different direction and talk about some of the broader kind of macro trends that we're seeing today. And as marketers, how do we support our companies and provide that leadership as our companies continue to evolve? And, back in the early days of COVID, which in some ways seems like yesterday and in some ways seems like a million years ago, many of us thought it'll be a few months and then we'll be back to normal. And then 6 months after that, we all started talking about the new normal. And now, let's say 18 months after that, there's no normal, and we are reacting, we're trying to navigate what's next. So as you and I were talking about this, there were kind of two key themes that kept coming up in the conversation: culture and connectedness. And again, how we as marketers and leaders in our business can play a role in helping our companies move forward. So when you think about the different roles you've had at Disney, for a good chunk of your career, talk about kind of navigating the workplace culture there. And as you've moved into this new role, how does that play into your leadership style?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Laurie. And I actually am going to call back to what you mentioned on the differences with kind of the B2B side, which is what you're on, and the B2C side. But what's interesting is I feel like there's so much more that they're all kind of meshing together. And like you said, it's not that there's a new normal or, things are, dead per se, but it's really just continuing to add on, right?
Yeah.
Your bag of tricks. And, it's funny because even when I was with the Disney movie Insiders team, we talk about how leveraging direct mail way before, but that's also coming back now, given no one's really getting physical mail anymore. And so
Yeah.
everything is a little bit of a treat, especially if you approach it the right way. And so to that point, I feel like even the way that we work with not only our kind of business partners, but also our consumers, all has to have such a focus on, I think, just, relationship building and relationship cultivating, really thinking about, what are the mindsets in which our partners and our fans are in. And so I think about from a company culture perspective. I know as a leader myself, it was really interesting during kind of COVID and also working remote. I feel like there's so many things that you don't necessarily think about right away, and then you start to just kind of have to really kind of get in the nuances of each of your team members. And obviously it's not possible for like people who are leading really large teams, but even if you kind of have a smaller set of people that you're kind of managing, they have all different preferences, different kind of nuances to their situations. And I've always kind of enjoyed being really empathetic to that. But one of the things that we had talked about was how workplace culture, there's pros and cons to working remote. I think everybody is maybe on a different spectrum of how much they want to go back versus how much they want to stay at home. I feel like I'm like squarely in the middle with hybrid. But one of the fascinating things that we kind of learned early on with my team was, how can we really think about inclusive practices when we're kind of working remotely, so that all different personality types feel like they can speak up in meetings. And not everybody's comfortable speaking over other people, even on even in person, let alone like on a screen, where you could potentially just hide away and close off your video and mute forever and just listen in like a fly on the wall. But we even started thinking about when you brainstorm, right? When you're working remotely, what are the ways in which we can provide different forums and methods, so that if people need 1 to 2 days to really think about ideas and don't just want to kind of share things like quickly out of the hat, then how can we leverage technology and different tools and co-working resources to be able to share those ideas up front and have the time to actually think about it, but then give a secondary forum where people have the ability to speak to those ideas, versus just always making it kind of a write-in or popcorn format where you're always going to get that anyways, right? So
Yeah.
I think that that's been really interesting to see how it's changed the way, and as leaders, where we have to be I keep on going back to this word empathetic, but really thinking about culture in a new way, because you have to really stretch and be able to say, I might feel a certain way and have certain tendencies or preferences when it comes to ways of working, but how can I best support my team to help them thrive during this time? And what are the things that we can all help to be more aware of? And even things, given Zoom calls, right? Like working with our disabilities ERG, and understanding how now with like real-time captioning, that has changed the game for some of them. And so then when we go back to a hybrid work model where people are back in the office and you start to have big meetings again, and everybody knows like those who have to join in the conference call, and you're trying to chime in every once in a while, but everyone forgets that people are even on the phone. But how do we continue, I would say, to your point about not a new normal, but just continuing to really think about the inclusive practices that we've learned during this time and can really expand on the way we worked before to represent all different types of workers and different types of personalities so that we can really create more of a sense of belonging. Because I think the other big piece from the last, year and a half, 2 years was we spend so much time with one another when it comes to working, and now it's like mixed in at home. And so you really recognize, like, especially if any of you guys have been kind of in those like long meeting days, which I know, Laurie, you and I talked a lot about our own preferences, but you just start to realize kind of where you need to prioritize things and where you need to really be taking care of yourself, but also with the people that you're working with, especially given everything else, honestly, that's happening in the world.
So I want to go back to you made some comments about some different techniques that y'all were using internally. Can you give some specific examples? Because I'm going to guess a lot of people listening would love some insight into things that they could be doing or incorporating from an inclusivity standpoint, especially as Zoom meetings are sure to continue.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that one of the big things that's, I guess, a little more generalized, but it's just setting expectations up front, right? Because like, I like to say it's not what I never coined this term, but like over communication is a gift. And so I think that, a lot of the times, especially while in kind of this instance of working remote, everything has to be very intentional. And then if not done intentionally, people are left to kind of assume or, try to figure and piece things out on their own. And so I find that setting expectations is a great way to just dismantle, any potential things that could come up. And so one of the big things that I know a lot of us have probably dealt with, we had a couple of people on my team who had babies. And so, it's just, you set the expectations up front that it's okay. It's, it's okay to have your kids in the screen. It's okay to, go on mute and, take video off when you need to. You don't always have to do a one-on-one now on Zoom. Calls are still a thing, right? Like, I think it's so important for that to also come top down, because as a leader, as leaders, we help to set the culture. And even as we kind of co-create culture together, I think it's important to say things like that, right? Which is, take the time you need. We're all working probably more now than we did before. Let's be real about that, just because we don't have that kind of, all right, drive time to really shut off. And so we have our phones always, we have our computers with us at all times. And so needing to take a jog or, still going to lunch, like all those things, I feel like being able to actually express that to your team is so important, because otherwise it's just, that was something that was surprising to me, is people still assume that it's not okay. And, maybe sometimes it's not okay in a culture, but the hope is that it's okay. And then the second thing that I know, Laurie, you and I specifically talked about was with the brainstorming piece. What we did was we actually leveraged some project management platforms. I know, there's a ton, but what we ended up doing was we modified our brainstorms to actually have a kind of foundational kickoff. And so what we do was we would take like 15 to 20 minutes to actually just run through the positioning, the strategy, the themes of what the campaign was supposed to be, and then let everybody brainstorm on their own and put ideas into the project management platform. And then the next day or 2 days later, we'd actually come back. And because all of the ideas were attributed to different people on the team, then the project manager could actually make sure that everybody had a say and got to kind of speak to their idea. And so felt like, if you were more of an introvert, you could have the time to actually think about your idea. And then everybody is able to build on it too. And you have kind of this repository of all of the ideas in one place that you can kind of then just, mix and match and build on. And it ended up being a great way for us to make sure that everybody was involved versus the people who maybe love to speak up a little bit more or more comfortable doing so. Which
we all know who they are.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's a great idea. And I mean, certainly something I would think you would keep going forward because it just solves so many problems and is a little bit maybe of a pandemic silver lining. I want to go, you've used the word empathy a lot, and that really resonates with me because, it seems like during the pandemic, when sort of work came into everyone's homes to some degree with being on calls, all of our employees are at different life stages. We were talking, a lot of women on the call today talked about having young children. I've got a teenager, but then on the flip side, something always happens with my mom or my in-laws. So I kind of feel like I'm going to be sending him to college, and now my parents
just doesn't stop
taking up my time. It's always something. And, how do you see Disney culturally becoming more empathetic, more broadly with this big shift that's not going to go away?
Yeah, I mean, not speaking on kind of behalf of the piece, but I think that one thing that it's led us all to do, like that I honestly really appreciated this past year as well, is you couldn't really turn away from anything that was happening in the news. And because everybody was so connected virtually, and really needing to kind of address things like burnout or mind states, when a lot of these kind of big cultural moments or just horrible things were happening, we really needed to take a step back and understand that we're all people, we're all human, and so how can we support each other and actually get to know each other on a way and a different level that we may have before. And so that was something that I actually really loved. Was I was part of our inclusion task forces and inclusion champions, kind of what we called it on our side. But we really took the time to actually make room for difficult and brave conversations to really drive connectedness between our different teams, which I think just helps us to work better together, given, again, we spend so much time. And you really don't always know what's happening outside, like behind the screen, right? And so taking a beat to just recognize that. I think one of the fascinating things too is there's the B2B, B2C, but now, and we talked about this a little bit, and I've talked with some other friends about it too, but there's even like internal marketing to employees, right? Like, and how can we reflect a culture that we're trying to exude outward, like internally. And so being able to kind of make sure that employees, team members feel really supported, feel like they belong, have a place to actually talk about hard things that are happening, or also take a break, right, when like different events or things are happening. and just having that be okay. I think that just drives more empathy in all of us to just be mindful of that. And I also think, like, obviously some really hard stuff with kind of the racial injustice and those kinds of things we went through kind of all collectively, I feel like, in many different ways, but it just kind of became something we couldn't not address. And so that I think was a silver lining in all of that.
Yeah, it's been fascinating. So Mobilewalla is a truly global company, and we've got a team in the US, a team in Kolkata, India, a team in Singapore, and then people sprinkled in other places. So kind of before the pandemic, we'd been working globally, but hadn't really thought much of it, which I know sounds weird. And sort of during the pandemic, everybody went home, and and when I say we, I really mean me, because when you're head of marketing at a small company, you're HR, your internal communications, you're the voice of reason some days. So I really doubled down on internal comms from a communication standpoint. So agree, you made the point before about over communicating. It was just such an upsetting, disruptive time. And I thought, let's get as much out there to our employees as possible, but also let's try to build some ties. I mean, especially our team in India, they had so many crazy COVID surges, and employees' families were ill. And so we tried, I tried more, we're a Teams company, not a Slack company, but, doing more channels. We did kind of a fun thing for the holidays, which was, what were the movies you watched during COVID? What was your favorite book that you read? What was your COVID guilty pleasure? And just try to do things to kind of build those more global bonds. And then also, when you think about inclusion in different ways, we have people from all kinds of cultures now. I try to encourage, let's learn about this holiday that's going on in a specific remote region of India that 2 employees come from. So it's been kind of fun, but it's just a lot of my days about external marketing. But then I try to step back and think, how do we glue everybody together? Because I think in the end, we're going to be more successful with that. I think it's interesting, and a lot of the other speakers today, and most people work at larger companies, where I think a lot of them, and Disney included, have done a lot of admirable things for their employees. When you're at a smaller company, my leadership, and of course, I'm assuming none of them are listening to me today, is far less enlightened on the whole sort of what's going on, and maybe not empathetic. So, I've fought the internal battle of, we're not going back to being in the office 5 days a week. It's not going to happen. And they're like, no, we'll find people who want to do that. And I'm like, those people don't exist anymore. And I'm like you, I like being in the office. I like building the relationships. I like being with people, but I do appreciate a couple days at home. And so I'm trying to move us to more of a hybrid model, while sort of and fighting some internal battles on the world has changed and it's not going back. And our job is to change with it, not to try to fight that, because we're not going to be successful. So, I mean, that take me into another line of questioning. With COVID and working remote, we talked about the company culture side of that, but how, when one of the other words we keyed in on was around collaborating, but also the sense of connectedness. How do you see how do you see the importance of that changing both within your work environment, as well as kind of within the professional environment and networking and just building those relationships. And how are you thinking about that differently?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think during this time, it's been really fascinating to see how much it's actually gotten easier to network in a sense when it comes to, I would say, actually external networking, just because events and things that you maybe wouldn't have been able to do. I'm a little plug for brand innovators, I guess, because we're doing this right now. But a lot of like the private roundtables and those things that would have been difficult otherwise, to kind of go and drive to. I feel like a lot more people have been able to make the time and be able to fit that in. So I know that that's definitely something I hope continues. But I think going back to what we talked about with intentionality, it's so interesting to kind of think about how strategic networking has modified in a way when you have to think, because everything again is prioritization. If you have a ton of meetings, like a really heavy meeting schedule all the time, then inherently taking on different one-on-ones and all of that kind of stuff is difficult, because that's just another especially drain for you, right? I think Laurie, we talked about that we're both like secretly introverted, more so just that we're fueled by being able to kind of take time alone, but can be extroverted when needed. And now it's I'm always like asking my own myself, like, do I want to ask for another touch base, or is there another way to kind of just do this? And so you have to be so intentional about the time you set with people. But I also think it helps us to be really like, I would say, goal oriented in meetings. Like I always laugh at the mugs and memes that say this is a meeting that could have been an email. But like, you honestly have to make sure now that, at least the hope is that if you're putting a meeting on the calendar, that it's action oriented, which I think is a great thing. But then what that also allows you to do is just meeting so many more people, I think, from a global perspective as well, because now we can kind of have this like level setting of being able to meet virtually. And it's funny because we had this technology before. It just, I haven't met, at least from a kind of video perspective, even so many of our clients before, like in our vendors. And now I know all of their faces, right? Before it was always they'd come to visit us in Burbank, and then we'd be like, oh, finally putting a face to the name, like after years of emailing or like conference calling with each other. And now it's really nice to be able to kind of see people. So yeah, I think that it's not necessarily a full change, but more so modifying kind of how you interact with others, and how you have to be more strategic about who you're connecting with, but also and making the time for, quite honestly, but then also being really intentional about the time you do actually spend kind of cultivating those relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I miss in person. Atlanta's a big networking town. It's a big social town. And I have been, doing small scale meet for coffee, stuff like that. We haven't had big in-person things, but I will say, and we were joking, we're extroverts at work and introverts outside of work.
Yeah.
But I do find sometimes it's hard to get geared up to do something, or I'll think, oh, I don't want to go to that 7:00 networking thing, or I just want to go home after work. I'm tired. But I do find that I always learn something. I always meet someone interesting. I find you just never know where your paths cross with people, and when you can help someone or when someone can help you. So I think it's so important, from a career standpoint. And, I've also found when I talk to, and this will kind of lead me a little bit into kind of our closing topic, when I talk to younger people or mentor younger people, I always tell them, get involved in a professional group. And now it can be online. I mean, that just opens up your horizons massively to the opportunity. But get involved in a professional group, build relationships, volunteer, be active, and get involved in a nonprofit or something that matters to your heart, and that you can put your time in there. Also, as a marketer, I find I learn a lot from the nonprofits I'm involved in on the marketing side, and have participated in, in their marketing committees or whatever. But I think it's so important just to feel that you're a part of something bigger. And especially in these times too, that again, everything is so disorienting, to have that network to kind of hang on to, or to have those people who can help give you some perspective. Or just to, as I listened to so many speakers today, and I was like, oh, just you feel like you're in a support group, and you're hearing from all these people going through, such a similar experience. So closing it out, let's talk a little bit about, and this came up in one of the earlier discussions as we talked about networking. Think, your personal board of directors, and who you feel has helped your career, who you've helped, and kind of how you've gone about building those relationships and creating that group.
Yeah. And I have to actually hop as well, but I will answer short and sweet, which is, I think that at the end of the day, your board of directors can really be so many different people, but I know that I've benefited from having a champion who is amazing, and she's been vital in kind of my own growth at Disney, and just as a leader. So I really respect her and always go to her for different things. But I think, I always think about how, you have your mentors, you have coaches, and you have your kind of champions, and they all serve different roles. And then you also have your peers who you can talk to, right? And so if I would encourage others, I think this past year, I've also gotten a lot more connected with the AAPI community, and have been trying to both give back there, but just learn more to understand where the nuances are for my own kind of being a Chinese female executive, right, in the entertainment industry. And so, I think your board of directors is so important, and whatever way you kind of put it together, it's just starting by asking the question of, hey, would love to kind of talk with you more about career. And I always also say, never assume that someone knows what you want to do or what you want to be.
Right.
Always kind of make that known, and know that your voice should be heard and is valuable.
So be purposeful with the ask. Well, y'all, I was so worried that we weren't going to take enough time, and here we are, we've run out of time. So Christina, thank you so much. Thanks for the wonderful insight. Ryan, thank you for having me. This was a great session and a really great day.
Yeah, I want to say thank you both, Laurie and Christina, for hanging out with us here. I don't know if you're East Coast, West Coast, where you're at in the States, in the world, maybe. But thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for
Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie.
And to all of our speakers today, and to our listeners, want to give a huge shout out and say thank you. And also to all of our sponsors, want to say thank you for helping us out with this particular event. We are going to be continuing our Women in Marketing events next month. So if you have any interest in checking that out, be sure to check out our Brand Innovators livecast page. We have a ton of other live casts that are happening. We're doing 2-3 a week not to mention a handful of different roundtable discussions, and actually live events. I know that there was a bit of a discussion about, the return to live. And if it is something you're comfortable with and you happen to be in New York City towards the end of September or for advertising week, definitely reach out to us, let us know, because we're going to have some amazing dinners outside that are going to be taking place. And we want to invite all of you to come out and join us as well. So to everybody here, again, thank you for your time. On behalf of everyone at Brand Innovators and Women in Marketing event today, I want to say thank you. Have a terrific day, and we'll see you next week.